I want to thank you for being here this morning as we continue working through the book of Revelation. Many Christians, we have said, have 65 books in their Bible. The book of Revelation intimidates them, so they never go there. But if you read the first few chapters of the Bible, you can tell this is a great story, and a great story needs a great ending. God's ending. You need to read the 66th book of the Bible to get that ending. So that's what we've been doing, but I must confess this morning I feel a bit intimidated about our next step into this incredible vision, because we are going into holy space today. I feel a bit like the young man that was applying for the 82nd Airborne Division, and he was asking his recruiter what all was involved in parachute training school. And the recruiter told the young man that it lasted 3 weeks. He said, in the first week, we separate the men from the boys. And in the second week, we separate the men from the fools. The young man said, well, what happens in the third week? The recruiter said, the fools jump. I cannot imagine what it would be like to fall from heaven to earth, but even harder to imagine and harder to articulate is what it would be like if you went the other direction, from the earth to the heavens. And what fool would think he's adequate to describe that? But that is my task today. I'm asking you to join me as we enter into holy space, a place where imagination really needs to take over, because words are not adequate. And as we see this, you'll understand that John is stretching the limits of human vocabulary to try to articulate his chance to enter the throne room of God. Revelation 3 ends with Jesus knocking on the door, asking his church to let him come in. But as Lindsay read, the very first thing that we see in Revelation 4 is Jesus opens the door to heaven and asks his church to come up and take a look. We know that Revelation is written to a church in crisis, a church under oppression, a church with a government asking for worship, a worship that it could not legitimately give and still call Jesus their Lord. And in this vision, John does not say that things are about to get better. He writes about things that are soon to take place, and as we will see, they are terrible things. They are frightening things awaiting the church of that age and our age. And so I find it interesting that before we look at all the hell breaking loose around us, he wants us to look up and see the throne of God. Or to put it another way, before you look around you, you need to look above you. Because the function, the purpose of apocalyptic literature is to encourage oppressed people. This genre asks its readers to alter their perception of reality. Now, here's the reality that they were told every single day. The dominant story engraved in marble on every major building, the dominant story is that Rome is in charge. And if you want it to go well with you, you'd better give Rome anything she asks. And she asks for your total allegiance and worship. That was the dominant story. But Revelation offers a counter story. Revelation depicts Rome as a puppet of Satan. Revelation depicts Rome as about to come under the judgment of God. And in John's vision, The curtain is pulled back so that those of us in this earthly realm can get a glimpse of a greater reality that we desperately need to see. Because if you're going to survive what's going on around you, you need to know what is going on above you. All of you have seen pictures of whales breaching. And think about this. The whale lives most of its life in a lower reality. In fact, that is where it sees most clearly. But if that whale does not come up occasionally and take a breath of a higher reality where it cannot see as well, it will not survive below. It needs to come up and take a breath of what is above to survive the world in which it can see more clearly in below. And that is what Revelation is doing for us. So John says, come with me. Come see what I saw. And what he saw was a throne with someone sitting on it. And everything depends on who is sitting on that throne. And what God is doing is encouraging His church by giving them a vision of Himself. And again, how do you, with finite words, describe an infinite God? John does his best. He says, it's like precious gemstones, like a rainbow, like lightning and thunder. It was brilliance. And that was the best he could do, because he is trying to take us to a place that is far beyond our imagination. But the one thing we do know, the dominant thing we know that John remembers more than anything else, he saw a throne. 11 times in 11 verses, he wants you to know, I saw a throne. In fact, that word throne is found 60 times in the New Testament. 45 of those 60 times, that's 75% of the time, that word appears in the book of Revelation. And it's not just God who has a throne. We saw in the 7 churches that Satan has a throne too. But every time Satan's throne is mentioned, it's on the earth. And every time God's throne is mentioned, it is up in heaven, because the idea is that Satan is going to be overthrown because he is underthrown. What John sees is that God sits on his throne. And because he sits, the church is able to stand and withstand what it is going through. Because everything we are facing is underthrown. And I want to unpack that with you. In John's vision, one thing that he saw is that in heaven they say over and over, all creation is under the throne. Now, we don't just worship God meaninglessly. That is, there is a because to our worship. And this throne room is a worship center, and they worship God because of who He is and because of what He does. And that is especially seen in God's relation to His creation. And there is this song that they keep singing over and over and over around the throne. By the way, those of you that complain about the songs we sing, where we sing a chorus over and over again, I'm just telling you, get ready. Because in heaven there are going to be some songs you are just going to sing over and over and over again. And here is one of those songs. Look at verse 8 in Revelation 4. Day and night they never stop saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Now, what are they saying? What is the preeminent thing that they want us to know about God? God is holy. What does that mean? It means that He is set apart. It means that He is wholly other. He is not like anything else that exists, because everything else that exists was created except Him. And that's why those 4 living creatures are around the throne. One of them has a head of a lion. It represents all the undomesticated animals. One of them has the head of an ox. It represents all of the domesticated animals. One of them has the head of an eagle. It represents all of the flying creatures. One of them has the head of a man. It represents mankind. Everything is creature. Everything is underthrown, because it was created by the one on the throne. Now, there are other thrones that He sees. There are the 24 elders, which I think represents the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles. In other words, whether it's before Jesus, whether it's after Jesus, it's all underthrown. Remember, when you were a kid, you go to Grandma's house when you were little, and there was the big people's table and there was the little kids' table, and you had to sit at the little kids' table because you weren't ready to sit at the big kids' table. And that's what they are saying. God, we will never, ever, ever be ready for your seat. Now, this is important. Heaven never loses awe over the fact that God created everything. I think we do. I think we relegate the creation to Sunday school, where we teach our little kids that God made the hippopotamus, and then we forget about that. They never forget about it in heaven. They never stop saying to God, you made everything. Look at verse 11 in chapter 4. You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being. Why is that important? Because one of the great lies in our reality is that the created can actually give life purpose and meaning. It's the one thing that has got to get settled. Paul said in Romans 1, that's actually at the root source of all sin. That at the root of all sin, there is this idea that somehow you can take the created and you can put it where only the Creator belongs. Paul says that's the root of all sin. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes that it's the source of all emptiness, of all meaninglessness. Solomon says he looked at everything under the sun, at everything in our reality. And he had all the power, all the fame, all the things, all the money, all the sex any person could ever desire. And he said, it's all vanity, because I'm still going to die. And I'm going to have to leave everything to my kids, who are probably going to grow up to be morons. Because if you try to find life under the sun only, then you are destined for misery. That's why in heaven, it's settled. There is Creator and there is created. And creation never belongs on the throne. You notice when Jesus was on the earth that the creation knew He was master. If He told a storm, be quiet, it obeyed. If He told fish, go into that net, they obeyed. Over 1,000 years ago, there was a Danish king named Canute who ruled over England. And he got tired of his servants telling him how magnificent he was. So one day, he asked them to take his throne to the beach. And he sat on his throne, and he ordered the tide to not come in. After a while, water was lapping the legs of his throne. They say that he stood up, took off his crown, and placed it on the statue of Christ. And he never wore it again during his reign. Because everything that exists is underthrown of the one who created everything. The next thing John saw in his vision was that all history is under the throne. Now, that might not even be the best word, but listen, for a few moments, I'm going to try to talk about something that my mind is too feeble to express. God is worshiped for who He is and what He does. And the most amazing thing about God is His isness. Moses said, "What's your name?" God said, "It is I am. I am the uncaused one. I am the self-existent one. I am the one in whom the essence of is. The power of being, that's me." You see, time is my enemy. You doubt that? Just look at a picture of me from when I started at this church. Time is my enemy. But time is God's creation. And so it says in verse 9 of Revelation chapter 4, "Whenever the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to Him who sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever." Who else can you say that about? This is not just doctrine. This is a powerful rebuke of our allegiance to the kingdoms of men, because the glory of all other thrones passes. I don't care who the czar was, who the Caesar was, who the Pharaoh was. There was a time when they weren't, and there is a time when they won't be. Of only one can you ever say, He was, He is to come. Rome called itself Roma Eternia, eternal Rome. But everyone knew there was a time when Rome wasn't. And there's been at least 12 emperors by the time John wrote Revelation. And the current Caesar, who wants everybody to call him a god, little g, is going to die. And everybody knows that. But over and over in Revelation, you read who was and is to come. And I know this is hard for our minds to really wrap around, but if we could just even get into the shallow water here, it would do us so much good. It would protect us from pride. Let me explain. He was, He is to come. You weren't, you currently are, and one day you won't be. So why do you take yourself so seriously? And why do you have a hard time being happy if the world doesn't actually revolve around you? It would protect us from pride. It would protect us from despair. We are supposed to be a people who have a witness to the world of a peace that passes understanding. But how often do we get so worried, so tense about the future if this law isn't passed, or if this person isn't elected, or if that war isn't won? And what John is saying is that he saw someone on the throne who is before history, who is above history, and who will be after history. He saw that the past and the present and the future are underthrown. In Hebrews, the Hebrew author says, "Your throne, O God, will last forever and ever. In 1994, they did a documentary on the 50th anniversary of D-Day. They interviewed a lot of people that were still alive during that invasion. And what was interesting was one of the men that they interviewed was on one of the boats that was transported across the channel that stormed the beach. And he said, when I looked around at everything that was going on around me, I thought there is no way that we're going to win this. But they also interviewed a pilot who was flying high above. And he said, looking down on what I saw, I knew there was no way we could lose. John said, I saw one who was sitting on the throne, who was and is to come. He has no term limit. And that means he can put a limit on anything that opposes his purposes, which is the other thing that John saw. All evil is under the throne. Because the real question that Revelation is wrestling with is this one. God, if you are ruling, why does it feel like evil is winning? And you know, there is a good way to ask that question. The Bible actually allows for lament. We're going to see later all of the saints that are under the altar, and they're going to ask, why, God? How long? How long will you let this go on, God? There is a good way to ask that question, but there is a bad way too. Because there's a way to ask that question where what you really are saying is, God, if I was in charge, I would do a better job of running things than you are currently doing right now. We want God to deal with evil the way that we want it dealt with, which typically means total eradication. But the consistent witness of Scripture, Job to Revelation, is that when we ask the question, it's not that we get a why answer, it is that we get a picture of who. And the vision is saying, before you ask that question, you better take a good look at that throne. And in front of that throne, there is a sea. And that sea is so still that it looks like it's made of glass. And that metaphor may not mean much to you, but it would mean a lot to a Jew. Because to the Jew, the sea was the symbol of evil and chaos. The sea is where the great beast Leviathan lived, and the Jews were not famous for producing sailors. They hated the sea. In Daniel chapter 7, it is out of the sea that the 4 empire beasts come to oppress the people of God. Revelation 13, the dragon calls out of the sea the mighty beast that is going to kill the people of God. The sea is evil. That's why in Revelation 21, when the new Jerusalem descends, the first thing it's going to say is that there will be no sea there. It doesn't mean there's not going to be any water in heaven. It means there isn't going to be any evil in heaven. But right now, before the throne, the sea is calm. The sea is no threat to God. Now that's important because you know this world is wicked. Some of you right now are dealing with some very terrible things. And if all you do is look under the sun at this current reality, it might make sense for you to go and side with Babylon, because it really looks like they're winning. But if you could look above, you will side with the only one who certainly one day can deliver us from evil. The psalmist said this in Psalm 11, verse 3, "If the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. Back in the 1930s, there was a Christian doctor in Nazi Germany who was one of the blessed ones. Instead of being executed, he was about to be exiled. And he said that his last night that he was in Germany, he was walking the streets of Hamburg, and he was depressed because, in his own words, demonic forces have taken over my government. What hope is there? And he sits on this bench, and as he's sitting there reflecting, he hears this tune, and it's coming from an organ down the street, and he recognizes the tune, "A mighty fortress is our God," and the words came back to him. "And though this world with demons filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear. For God hath willed His truth to triumph through us." And he said, an overwhelming peace descended on him because he remembered who sits on the throne. And so, despite everything that is going on around you, we are here today because we have chosen to join a chorus above us. And one more thing, did you notice in Revelation 4 that everything is described in relation to the throne? Everything is around the throne. There is no question in heaven what the center that unites everything is. Here is why that's important. If God is on that throne, He was, He is, and He is to come. He never leaves. If we can keep that view in mind, we won't get off center. Did you know what the word eccentric means? It means crazy, because it literally means off center. To be eccentric is to be out of center. And when you try to build your life under the sun, you have picked the wrong center. Your life is out of balance. Your life will become eccentric, crazy. Several years ago, award-winning novelist David Foster Wallace was asked to give the commencement at Kenyon College. And here's what he said to the seniors. Here's something else that's true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there's actually no such thing as atheism. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And pretty much anything you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, then you will never have enough. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you'll always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you'll die a million deaths before they finally plant you in the ground. Worship power, and you'll feel weak and afraid, and you'll need even more power over other people to keep that fear at bay. Worship your intellect. Worship trying to be seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid and a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. Some that hear this message are not Christian. Some that watch it on the internet, they won't be a Christian. And you might think that my particular values are nuts. Some of my ways seem to be crazy. But I have to be candid. If you are centering your life on anything besides an eternal reality, I think you've made the crazy choice. We are all worshiping something. I just want to ask you, is what you are worshiping glowing right now? Is lightning coming out from its chair? When Galileo said that the center of our solar system is not the earth, it is the sun, everyone thought he was crazy. But finally, everyone had to completely readjust to the real center. And that is what the vision of Revelation 4 does for us. God is the center, and you need to be making adjustments constantly in life to the real center so that you do not live eccentrically. And listen to me, life will pull you that way. It will tug you that way. It will pull you in the direction of eccentricity. But there's something you can do about it. It's called worship. You, like those around the throne, intentionally, vigorously tell God who He is and what He does. And you will see, all of a sudden, you've re-centered everything. So I want to give you an opportunity this morning to recenter yourself. We're going to sing a song of worship to the only one who's worthy of it. So would you stand up and join me as we sing together?